Welcome again to our next session. Yes, our next session will be about the big disrupting concept in property investment, which is exactly what Wealth Assist is going to provide you. And during the session, we're going to talk about how the Assist Group disrupts the property investment industry. We basically are doing that through 4 specific introductions to certain disruptors in the investment market. And that's number 1 is recreating the world through property. Disrupting the way in which the distressed property owner and property investment industry is operating. As we all know, the current distressed property industry is very much based on misusing people's misfortune to actually enrich yourself. How little can I pay for a property to make the maximum, get the maximum result? Now I know it is something in the industry where they say you make your money when you buy. That is true. But do we have to do that in a way that is misusing other people's misfortune? And we have to ask ourselves, is that right? I think the big disruptor that we bring into the industry here is that we are making impact property investments, in this case, meaning changing lives while we're making good returns. And we do that by assisting the owner in 1 or 2 ways. One, to property owner keeping his property if he is able to. And secondly, always getting more out than what he would have got out if it just went on a distressed sale. So I think that's very important. It always needs to be a win-win for all. That is part of the ethos of the organization. We're also always looking at when a person, for instance, repurchase that property, that it be substantially less than the current market value. And when they get something out, it needs to be substantially more than they would have got out in a normal transaction. So that is the purpose of this, a specific disruption and approach to that. Then our second disruptor, and here I have to ask you as the audience, have you ever done a transaction where you actually have predetermined contractual return on investments when you do property investments? And if by the raise of your hands you can show me, and I'm sure there won't be many, because we have estimated returns and budget more or less what we are going to make, but we don't really actually know exactly what we are going to make. So that is one of the things where the Wealth Assist products will give you a predetermined contractual return during this transaction period. Then secondly, we consistently are doing that through all property cycles. And there I can actually share that we have done some tests and stress tests in that period of time from 1972 up till 2018, where we have proven that every client that actually would have purchased in that period of time and used our product would have got the exact proposed return. And there I want to exclude, you do have the odd situation where things may not exactly work out as it is, but it's very limited. It's less than 5% in the whole Wealth Assist product line over the last 7 years, so that should give you quite a lot of confidence. The fact that you can actually provide consistent returns through various property cycles is, I think, a very big secret. If we take at the current process that we are dealing with at the moment, where we have capital returns of about 5% per annum, and if you are doing very well, you probably have a 5 to 7% net yield on your rental income. That gives you about between 10 and 12%. So, which is good, but it's not great. In our case, that would have been at this stage 17% consistently. So I think that for any investor would be a big disruptor and a good opportunity. Then lastly, but definitely not the least, is that you will never pay more than 75% of market value of that property, all cost inclusive. And I'm saying all cost, I refer to maintenance cost, and I refer to transfer cost, assessment fees, whatever that may be, is all inclusive in that 75%. So looking at that, if you deduct more or less the fees, which is in a normal transaction, you will realize that you're actually paying in the region of about 60 to 65% of market value maximum, which is a fantastic price to pay in that. The third key and disruptor that we do is Property Assist is your trusted property investment origination disruptor. That means from our side, we provide you with on-the-shelf, pre-vetted, risk-mitigated property investment opportunities. Now, I don't know, for you, I'm sure there's a lot of guys that are finding the opportunities themselves. You know what time it takes to go into that specific search for the right property at the right price. And if we actually think about having all the professionals which have in the Property Assist management team that's going to actually look at each transaction on your behalf, you literally are spending probably about 2 to 3 hours maximum per transaction. And that includes everything from the full turnkey solution facilitation of procurement, the risk assessment, the maintenance, property management, the pre and post sales administration, mortgage facilitation, transfer and bond registration, and the recovery of the property owner and the facilitation of any sales should there be a sale involved in that transaction. So I think that is actually where you can actually make your money work for you and you don't work for your money. So I think it's something different than what is available in the industry. There's not a lot of people at the moment that provide a pre-vetted, risk-mitigated transaction whilst you're making impact at the same time. Then the last one, but definitely not the least, of the 4 keys is Property Assist changes property investment from good to great. We all know that your current buy-to-let and flips and those type of things are good investments. But we can't always, when you buy a buy-to-let, for instance, you'll be in a transaction for a certain period of time, and if you want to keep that property for long term, because we've all been, you know, when we grew up, we were all taught, buy property, keep it, and that will be the best way to make money. It's a good way, and it's not a bad product. It's a buy-to-let, it's a reasonably good product, but when you have been introduced to our recovery products, you will understand that it's not comparable. And there's various reasons for it, which we'll run a bit into in the next session. But making that mind shift from buy to keep versus compound impact property investment is going to really change your viewpoint in the future. And I'm going to illustrate in some way for you at the moment. Still having property right through that process as security in the investment term that we are dealing with. Okay, so here's a practical example that you guys can look at. It really just shows you on a buy-to-let you would have paid $1,050,000 more or less. The value of the property would have been $1,050,000 and you'll pay $1 million. If you are fortunate, you'll buy at 95% all costs inclusive. In our case, it's you buy a 1.3 million property at R1 million. So immediately your security is substantially better. Then secondly, your returns are predetermined and higher than what you can get from your current property investment. And we're talking here after rates, taxes, expenses, you will have a monthly net yield of prime plus 1, in this case 11%, which means that you are from day one in a cash positive position. Then your capital growth will also be predetermined on the recovery product, whilst you got hopeful returns depending on what other influences we have in that timeline. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see the difference. This is 2 types of investments. The one in the blue line is actually the buy-to-let property transaction, bought for R1 million, kept for a 10-year period, have escalations on your rentals of approximately about 3 to 5%. I think we worked on 5% in this case. And ending up with capital growth, I think we worked on 7%, which is higher than what we're actually achieving at the moment, which provided us with a property that's worth after 10 years about 2.3 million. Now, all that we do here, we don't do all kind of guru things or funny things. We are just using the eighth wonder of the world, as we know, the compound interest model. So what we do in this case, we have invested R1 million, but here's the difference. Here you have sold to a seller or property owner in distress, who now are recovering and repurchasing his property within 2 years at a predetermined value. That means your profit, for if we go back to that rate of 18% more or less, you'll have a growth of 18% per annum on R1 million, 180,000 a year. If you do that sum for yourself, just make sure I do my sums right. And for 2 years, it's 1,360,000, which means now he's purchasing that property back. So work out for yourself, what is the amount that you're going to get back at that stage? And that amount will obviously be 1 million, which is your capital, plus the 360, which is your profit, which give you 1,360,000. The key now is, what do we invest now? We don't invest R1 million again. We invest that money because we have to compare apples with apples here. Your other property you're still stuck with, okay? Because you said that you want to have the approach of a transaction where you keep the property. So in this case, now you're in a position where you reinvest that 1,360,000. So on what do you earn your 18% now? And that's very simple. It's on the full amount, which means now you earn 18% on that amount. And if you do that every second year, our average is actually 20 months, but if we work on 2 years, you'll end up after 10 years with the same amount of investment at property values of 3,380,000 more or less, which on the end of the day will provide you an income of about, at that stage, if we just buy property with that money after the last transaction, and you also want to keep it at 7% net yield on your rentals, then you will have 19,000 Rand a month, which on the buy-to-let property with that escalations will be at about 13,000, which is about 6,500 to 7,000 Rand difference in a month, which makes a massive difference if you take in consideration that you started with the same amount of investment. So that is really a key, and I believe that on the end of the day, if you use those 4 keys and you can do this, you'll be a total different property investor. Makes impact, earn stable, consistent returns with properties at 75% of market value, which is fantastic. Let's take a mini break and see you in the next section. Thank you very much.